A nice, calm and respectable lady went into the pharmacy, right up to the pharmacist, looked straight into his eyes, and said, "I would like to buy some cyanide." The pharmacist asked, "Why in the world do you need cyanide?" The lady replied, "I need it to poison my husband." The pharmacist's eyes got big and he exclaimed, "Lord have mercy. I can't give you cyanide to kill your husband. That's against the law. I'll lose my license. They'll throw both of us in jail. All kinds of bad things will happen." "Absolutely not. You cannot have any cyanide." The lady reached into her purse and pulled out a picture of her husband in bed with the pharmacist's wife. The pharmacist looked at the picture and replied, "Well now, that's different. You didn't tell me you had a prescription." A man is getting into the shower just as his wife is finishing up her shower when the doorbell rings. The wife quickly wraps herself in a towel and runs downstairs. When she opens the door, there stands Bob, the next door neighbor. Before she says a word, Bob says, "I'll give you $800 to drop that towel." After thinking for a moment, the woman drops her towel and stands naked in front of Bob. After a few seconds, Bob hands her $800 and leaves. The woman wraps back up in the towel and goes back upstairs. When she gets to the bathroom, her husband asks, "Who was that?" "It was Bob, the next door neighbor," she replies. "Great." The husband says, "Did he say anything about the $800 he owes me?" A woman is at home when she hears someone knocking at her door. She goes to the door, opens it, and sees a man standing there. He asks the lady, "Do you have a vagina?" She slams the door in disgust. The next morning she hears a knock at the door. It's the same man, and he asks the same question to the woman, "Do you have a vagina?" She slams the door again. Later that night, when her husband gets home, she tells him what has happened for the last 2 days. The husband tells his wife in a loving and concerned voice, "Honey, I'm taking an off tomorrow so as to be home, just in case this guy shows up again." The next morning they hear a knock at the door and both ran for the door. The husband whispers to the wife, "Honey, I'm going to hide behind the door and listen, and if it is the same guy I want you to answer yes to the question, because I want to see where he's going with this." She nods yes to her husband and opens the door. Sure enough, the same fellow is standing there. He asks, "Do you have a vagina?" "Yes I do," says the lady. The man replies, "But would you mind telling your husband to leave my wife's alone and start using yours?" A couple drove down a country road for several miles, not saying a word. An earlier discussion had led to an argument and neither of them wanted to concede their position. As they passed a barnyard of mules, goats and pigs, the husband asked sarcastically, "Relatives of yours?" "Yep," the wife replied, "In-laws." A newlywed couple moves into their new house. One day the husband comes home from work and his wife says, "Honey, you know, in the upstairs bathroom one of the pipes is leaking. Could you fix it?" The husband says, "What do I look like, Mr. Plumber?" A few days go by, and he comes home from work and his wife says, "Honey, the car won't start. I think it needs a new battery. Could you change it for me?" He says, "What do I look like, Mr. Goodwrench?" Another few days go by, and it's raining pretty hard. The wife finds a leak in the roof. She says, "Honey, there's a leak on the roof. Can you please fix it?" He says, "What do I look like, Bob Villa?" The next day the husband comes home, and the roof is fixed. So is the plumbing. So is the car. He asks his wife what happened. "Oh, I had a handyman come in and fix them," she says. "Great. How much is that going to cost me?" He snarls. Wife says, "Nothing. He said he'd do it for free if I either baked him a cake or slept with him." Well, what kind of cake did you make?" asks the husband. "What do I look like?" she says. "Betty Crocker." A husband and wife were golfing when suddenly the wife asked, "Honey, if I died, would you get married again?" The husband said, "No sweetie." The woman said, "I'm sure you would." So the man said, "Okay, I would." Then the woman asked, "Would you let her sleep in our bed?" And the man replied, "Yep, I guess so." Then the wife asked, "Would you let her use my golf clubs?" And the husband replied, "No, she's left-handed." A man in Scotland calls his son in London the day before Christmas Eve and says, "I hate to ruin your day, but I have to tell you that your mother and I are divorcing. 45 years of misery is enough." "Dad, what are you talking about?" the son screams. "We can't stand the sight of each other any longer," the father says. "We are sick of each other, and I'm sick of talking about this, so you call your sister in Leeds and tell her." Frantically, the son calls his sister, who explodes on the phone. Like hell they are getting divorced, she shouts, "I'll take care of this." She calls Scotland immediately and screams at her father, "You are not getting divorced. Don't do a single thing until I get there. I'm calling my brother back and we'll both be there tomorrow. Until then, don't do a thing. Do you hear me?" and hangs up. The old man hangs up his phone and turns to his wife. Sorted. They're coming for Christmas and they're paying their own way. There was this man who walked into a bar and says to the bartender, 10 shots of whiskey. The bartender asks, "What's the matter?" The man says, "I found out my brother is gay and marrying my best friend." The next day the same man comes in and orders 12 shots of whiskey. The bartender asks, "What's wrong this time?" The man says, "I found out that my son is gay." The next day the same man comes in the bar and orders 15 shots of whiskey. Then the bartender asks, "Doesn't anyone in your family like women?" The man looks up and says, "Apparently my wife does." Bill has worked in a pickle factory for several years. One day he confesses to his wife that he has a terrible urge to stick his penis into the pickle slicer. His wife suggests that he see a therapist to talk about it, but Bill vows to overcome this rash desire on his own. A few weeks later, Bill returns home absolutely as hen. His wife asks, "What's wrong, Bill? Do you remember how I told you about my tremendous urge to put my penis into the pickle slicer?" His wife gasps, "My God, Bill, what happened? I got fired." "No, Bill, I mean, what happened with the pickle slicer?" "Oh, she got fired, too." A man walks into a barber shop and says, "I'll have a shave and a shoe shine." The barber lathers his face and sharpens the straight edge, while a woman with the biggest, most beautiful breasts he has ever seen kneels down and shines his shoes. The man says, "You and I should spend some time in a hotel room." She replies, "My husband wouldn't like that." The man says, "Tell him you're working overtime and I'll pay you the difference." She says, "You tell him. He's the one shaving you." One night a man walks into a bar looking sad. The bartender asks the man what he wants. The man says, "Oh, just a beer." The bartender asks the man, "What's wrong? Why are you so down today?" The man said, "My wife and I got into a fight and she said she won't talk to me for a month." The bartender said, "So what's wrong with that?" The man sighed, "Well, the month is up tonight." As a couple gets into bed, the husband starts to rub and kiss his wife. She turns over and says, "I'm sorry, honey. I've got a gynecologist appointment tomorrow and I want to stay fresh." The husband sadly turns over. A few minutes later, he rolls back over and taps his wife. "Do you have a dentist appointment, too?" A wife arrived home after a long shopping trip and was horrified to find her husband in bed with a young lovely thing. Just as she was about to storm out of the house, her husband stopped her with these words, "Before you leave, I want you to hear how this all came about. Driving home, I saw this young girl, looking poor and tired. I offered her a ride. She was hungry, so I brought her home and fed her some of the roast you had forgotten about in the refrigerator. Her shoes were worn out, so I gave her a pair of your shoes you didn't wear because they were out of style. She was cold, so I gave her that new birthday sweater you never wore even once because the color didn't suit you. Her slacks were worn out, so I gave her a pair of yours that you don't fit into anymore." Then as she was about to leave the house, she paused and asked, "Is there anything else that your wife doesn't use anymore?" And so, here we are. A man comes home to find his wife of 10 years packing her bags. "Where are you going?" demands the surprised husband. "To Las Vegas. I found out that there are men that will pay me $500 cash to do what I do for you for free." The man pondered that thought for a moment and then began packing his bags. "What do you think you are doing?" she screamed. "I'm going to Las Vegas with you. I want to see how you're going to live on $1,000 a year." Bill wakes up at home with a huge hangover. He forces himself to open his eyes, and the first thing he sees is a couple of aspirins and a glass of water on the side table. He sits down and sees his clothing in front of him, all clean and pressed. Bill looks around the room and sees that it is in a perfect order, spotless, clean. So's the rest of the house. He takes the aspirins and notices a note on the table. "Honey, breakfast is on the stove. I left early to go shopping. Love you." So he goes to the kitchen and sure enough there is a hot breakfast in the morning newspaper. His son is also at the table, eating. Bill asks, "Son, what happened last night?" His son says, "Well, you came home after 3 a.m., drunk and delirious, broke some furniture, puked in the hallway, and gave yourself a black eye when you stumbled into the door." Confused, Bill asks, "So, why is everything in order and so clean, and breakfast is on the table waiting for me?" His son replies, "Oh, that. Mom dragged you to the bedroom, and when she tried to take your pants off you said, 'Lady, leave me alone, I'm married.'" Make sure to like this video and subscribe for more jokes.